This video is brought to you by Eureka Ergonomic and their new smart coffee table, the perfect glow up for any living room or gaming room. Not only does it look nice, but it's got an inbuilt wireless charger, a speaker allowing you to connect via Bluetooth. Oh, and did I mention it's got a cheeky little fridge hiding inside? I just got one of these and it's been a massive upgrade to my setup. If you're interested, click the link below or stick around to the end of the video to learn more. Let's start with a spoiler disclaimer. I'm going to be extremely stingy with the footage I use here. I'll really stick to some nondescript cutscenes, to some set pieces you might have seen in trailers, to general open world stuff and side missions. So much of the impact of this game rests in its visual spectacle, and I don't want to take any of that away from you. If this is the first review you're watching, I'd recommend listening to reviews rather than watching them. That includes this one if you're particularly sensitive to spoilers. Okay, so with that out the way, let me say this. I know why you're here. You are not here to find out if Spider-Man 2 is good. You already know that Spider-Man 2 is good. You haven't played it yet, but you've got 2 eyes and 2 ears, and even if you don't, you can feel it in your jellies. This is a good video game, no two ways about it. What you want to know is this better than the first game, Spider-Man 2018, or the smaller spin-off Miles Morales released back in 2021? The answer to that is an unequivocal yes. This game looks vastly better owing to the power of the PS5 and how it's been put to work. It makes use of the DualSense controller in both novel and meaningful ways. It has a bigger world to explore, now incorporating both Brooklyn and Queens. It has deeper, more flexible combat. It has more enemy types, more open world activities, more big action set pieces, and most importantly, more Spider-Man, since Spider-Man 2 is told from the perspective of both Miles and Peter, allowing you to switch freely between them while exploring the open world, though the missions all require you to play one Spidey or the other, depending on which part of the story Insomniac want to tell in that moment. In conjunction with all of the more that Spider-Man 2 offers, the quality of this package cannot be overstated. From graphical fidelity to loading times to how bug-free it is, except for the spiders, to the strength of the voice work, the unbelievable combat that regularly looks and feels so good that it's hard to believe that you are actually controlling these characters as they do all of this stuff. It's genuinely remarkable. Sadly, when it comes to many AAA games in the modern era, so much of our time is spent talking about them being unfinished or broken or patchy storytelling or voice work, full of game design elements that clearly haven't been properly thought out or tested. Not so with anything Insomniac have released over the last few years, and certainly not so here in Spider-Man 2. It is an utterly complete and polished package that continues to cement Insomniac as one of the greatest studios working today. So by every tangible metric, this is a better game than Spider-Man 2018. But I do suspect that the conversation around Spider-Man 2 will center on the more intangible metrics. The characters, the story, how much innovation is brought to bear across the experience, and how it leaves you feeling at the end of it. Spider-Man 2018 left you pretty damn blown away. When those credits rolled, there was little doubt that you had just played through one of the best superhero games ever made, a brilliant retelling of the Spider-Man mythos starring not only his closest friends and loved ones, but also a pantheon of almost every iconic Spider-Man villain. Not all of them, of course, but a lot of them. And coupled with the emotional gut punches that game was willing to dish out at the back end, Spider-Man 2018 felt like a king hit from out of nowhere. It's hard to recreate that feeling, but it is possible. I think God of War Ragnarok managed to find a new level, not through its core gameplay, but in the expansiveness and functionality of its semi-open worlds, and in particular in its storytelling, which introduced so many new characters and did incredible things with all of them. Most importantly, it used our knowledge of an ancient prophecy as a jumping-off point for all manner of narrative chicanery, subverting expectations at every turn, and Sony Santa Monica could do that because they could write whatever the hell they liked. The story of Kratos is their story, and it's an original story. No one can tell them no, and we as an audience can't bring any preconceptions to it. It's not like that for Spider-Man. Firstly, this isn't Insomniac's character, it's Marvel's, and that sort of partnership is naturally going to create some constraints, especially for a character as popular and ubiquitous as Spider-Man. More than that though, the stories that are told with this character usually aren't new stories. They're remixes of old stories, ones we've been told and retold countless times over the years in comics, cartoons, movies, and games. There's great comfort in that, but it also allows us to see the twists and turns coming before they do, which naturally dulls some of their sharpness and cut through. I think there's a little bit of that going on in Spider-Man 2. This definitely has some new elements that I found moving and powerful, in particular the way Spider-Man 2 depicts the friendship between Peter and Harry, the complex relationship between Peter and Miles Miles' personal journey as it relates to the death of his father at the hands of Martin Lee, aka Mr. Negative. These things ring out and are the emotional high points for a game that is by and large not going to surprise you with its story beats, and that I think also manages to mishandle a few of the other core relationships. This predictability is also present on the gameplay front. New combat options, enemy types, and open world activities absolutely broaden this experience, but they all still fit within a framework that's going to feel familiar. The inclusion of Brooklyn and Queens stands out as a bit of a missed opportunity, since they both feel functionally identical to Manhattan, and it would have been nice to see these spaces open up different gameplay experiences we couldn't get elsewhere. None of this is to say that Spider-Man 2 isn't an absolutely superb game, because it is. Like I said, by the numbers, this is a better game by almost every metric. But the stuff that you can't measure, that's where Spider-Man 2 didn't quite knock me on my ass the way that the first game did. For those who have not yet experienced an Insomniac Spider-Man game before, boy are you in for a treat, let me tell you. But if you're returning to these characters in this city after Spider-Man 2018 and Miles Morales, Spider-Man 2 is going to feel more familiar and comfortable rather than amazing or spectacular. Spider-Man 2 picks up immediately after the events of Spider-Man 2018 and Miles Morales. You're slipping into some familiar territory here with Peter and MJ, Miles and his high school buddies. They're each struggling in their own way, Peter finding it hard to hold down a full-time job while having to randomly disappear to go and save the city, and Miles struggling to focus on his college admission essay when he keeps getting the itch to go do Spidey things. It's that central tension that's always been at the heart of Spider-Man, how demanding that suit is, exacting a heavy toll on not only those who wear it, but on the friends and family around them. We've seen this story endlessly riffed on over the years, but it's rare to see it play out for Miles and Peter simultaneously. That's the beating heart of Spider-Man 2, the fact that there are two Spider-Men, both of them facing the exact same challenges but in totally different ways. In the past, they've each needed to carry this burden alone because who else could possibly understand it? But here they work as a team, they fight side by side and they confide in each other. Peter does play the role of mentor, sort of, but no one's an expert at being a Spider-Man, Peter included, and so they're both kind of figuring this out as they go, making plenty of mistakes along the way, and some of the most memorable and touching moments in the game happen when the two of them are just hanging out, perched high above the cityscape, chatting about how hard it is to be a Spider-Man.
We'll put Lee back where he belongs. Promise. Don't leave me hanging.
Trying to soak over here.
Not on my watch. Come on.
Special mention has to go to the way the relationship between Peter and Harry is built up. Harry has reappeared in Peter's life after spending time recovering from a chronic illness, and Peter is overjoyed, but we as an audience can't buy into that immediately because we don't know this Harry. What follows is a number of really fantastically constructed scenes where the two of them are both rediscovering their friendship. They'll go on a bike ride together and just chat about old times. They'll shoot hoops while shooting the shit, just two dudes being bros on the court. One of the best sequences in the game is this flashback sequence where Peter and Harry are trying to break into their old high school, and they're remembering when they first did this as teenagers, and it's this combination of tender storytelling and clever puzzle-style gameplay. Since Peter needs to use his Spidey powers to avoid the gaze of a lurking security guard, it culminates in a really important emotional moment, and as a result of this scene and others like it, I was really bought in on this bromance. I could see how much it meant to Peter and how high the stakes would eventually become when that relationship was eventually threatened. One of those threats is some new threads that Peter gets his hands on, the symbiote suit. Again, not going to spoil anything about this except to say that you probably already know that the symbiote suit is not our friend. It does bad things to us, including but not limited to making us very cranky. Peter's acquisition of the symbiote suit is a real high point for the game because it's when we get to start seeing Peter's voice actor, Yuri Lowenthal, absolutely burn the place down with his performance. You're used to this sort of nervous, nerdy, emotionally needy Peter Parker and a cocky, smart-mouth Spider-Man. The symbiote suit brings out this whole other side of Peter. Angry, vengeful, selfish, and at times cruel. If you've seen this story told in the past, it isn't surprising, but I really think the way Lowenthal delivers this transformation and opens up this other side of Peter is just so worth watching. There's been a lot of fantastic voice performances this year, from Resident Evil to Final Fantasy XVI to Baldur's Gate 3 and beyond, but I would absolutely class Lowenthal's performance as Symbiote Spider-Man as one of the best performances of the year. A true standout in a game full of standout performances.
Meaning something.
Miles was off his game. We almost had Lizard.
I'm sure he was just trying to help.
Sometimes it's just easier to do things myself.
It's not a spoiler to say that there are two antagonists in Spider-Man 2, Kraven and Venom. Kraven is, I don't know, man, he doesn't do much for me. An interesting through line of some of the best Spider-Man villains is that each of them could walk through Spider-Man's front door and be welcomed in by Aunt May or Miles' mother, Norman Osborn carving turkey in the Sammy Raimi movies, the Vulture being MJ's dad in Tom Holland's Spidey movies, the Prowler being Miles' uncle in Into the Spider-Verse, Doc Ock, the Lizard, Martin Lee, the list goes on. Obviously, you can't do this forever. Spider-Man can't be related or IRL friends with everyone he ends up fighting, but there's something in that definitely is not present in Kraven, and nothing else replaces it. He's a fairly unremarkable villain by many metrics, inexplicably well-resourced, needlessly cruel, quite one-dimensional compared to even some of the lesser villains that Spider-Man has squared off against. Kraven serves as a powerful catalyst for events in ways that I won't spoil, but he's almost incidental to the broader plot. And I do wonder if this villain was chosen as the focus because Sony have a Kraven movie coming out soon, and they needed to up his brand recognition. That sounds more cynical than I really am about this villain. He's fine, he has some moments, but yeah, for me personally, he just doesn't really do much. The other villain is Venom, and to be honest with you, it's impossible for me to talk about him without spoiling stuff, so I'm just not going to. I'm also not going to show you footage of him in action because I think that this is like the most terrifying and intimidating rendition of Venom that I have ever seen. The physicality and power of Venom, I don't think any film or cartoon, and certainly no video game, has captured it as well as Insomniac have captured it here. He is transfixing whenever he's on screen. You feel like nervous seeing him so much as look at another character in the story because you immediately fear for their safety. I have thoughts about how the whole Venom arc plays out, stuff I'll maybe share on the podcast when we're past the statute of limitations on spoilers, but the way Venom looks and sounds and moves is just unbelievable, and you are really going to love it. While certain character relationships stand out as high points, as does the whole symbiote suit thing and what it means for everyone involved, you can kind of guess where like 80 to 90% of this story is going to go before it gets there. You absolutely could say the same of many Spider-Man stories, including Spider-Man 2018, but that game was surprising for a lot of reasons, not just its narrative. It was the first time we were introduced to that rendition of New York City, to that web slinging, to that combat, to that Peter Parker before he got his facelift. There was also that pantheon of villains, which was just like, it was like a Saturday morning cartoon marathon where they only played the hits. So there was a lot in that package that really surprised, and I think similar to God of War Ragnarok, if Insomniac were going to recapture that magic, then I think it needed to be in a more challenging Spider-Man story, one that made us rethink this mythos. Spider-Man 2 doesn't do that, either because of constraints or intent. Spider-Man 2 is quite predictable, and while it's always a great story, well told, it does leave you feeling as though you've heard big chunks of it before, and as absolutely superb as the rest of the game is, the rest of the game fits into that overall pattern. Spider-Man 2 is a remarkably good-looking video game that runs spectacularly well across a variety of configurations. I say that because Spider-Man 2 offers 3 different graphical settings. There's your 4K high-fidelity mode at 30 FPS, there's a 4K performance mode targeting 60 FPS, and wedged in between the two of those is a cheeky 4K performance mode targeting 40 FPS. If you're wondering what the deal with that 40 FPS mode is, it's really designed for anyone rocking HDMI 2.1 and a 120Hz screen. The target frame rate with that combination of hardware produces an exceptionally smooth experience. 10 extra frames doesn't sound like a lot, but when combined with the right screen setup, it really is a bit of a game changer. Having said that, I played at 60 FPS because the game already looked fantastic, and if I can get an extra 20 frames a second, then I'm gonna do that. For a deep dive into all of this stuff, I'll refer you as always to Digital Foundry. They'll no doubt have excellent coverage of the 3 graphical options, including detailed comparisons. For me though, I will make clear that even when playing at 60 FPS performance mode, this game looks incredible. The scale of New York as it stretches out before you is overwhelming. The speed at which you can move through it all is dizzying, never any slowdown or any loading screens. The amount of ground traffic is massively increased versus even Miles Morales or Spider-Man Remastered, and the city itself is sporting so much geometry, detail, and lighting. That's the other thing I should mention. Those 3 modes I listed, all of them have ray tracing. You can't turn ray tracing off in this game because, to quote Insomniac, there's no need to. Insomniac found a way to make a game look this good, run this well, stream assets this quickly, and get it to a rock-solid 60 FPS with ray tracing enabled. I feel it is necessary for the government to step in and begin regulating Insomniac, because clearly these people are dangerous. The most powerful thing about Spider-Man's visuals aren't the textures, reflections, or frame rates, they're the framing. We don't often talk about the way that cutscenes or action sequences are directed in video games, the cinematography of them, but it's impossible to not notice how good Insomniac are at this stuff. From the massive, elaborate chase sequences across the city, to just the finishes where Miles and Peter tag team some goon to put out his lights, the absolute talent that has gone into making all of this action look this good is at times hard to fathom. Even more so because of the fact that it's like always playable. It's one thing to make some sick cutscene, but to allow the player to participate in that, to control it in ways that are more meaningful than just quick time events and button presses, that is rare, and there are very few games that are able to achieve this level of interactive spectacle. Zooming out, New York City in Spider-Man 2 is zoomed out. It now encompasses the low-rise industrial blocks of Brooklyn, as well as the white picket-fenced residential burbs of Queens. This was definitely one of the most talked-about features of Spider-Man 2, but sadly, this new real estate fails to achieve anything that the old real estate wasn't already doing. Brooklyn is basically the exact same as Manhattan, like you straight up can't tell the difference unless you're from there or something, I don't know. Queens certainly looks different, but it doesn't feel different. Sure, it has houses instead of warehouses, but functionally, as Spider-Man, you're doing the same thing there that you would do anywhere else, though you are more reliant on your wingsuit here for the absence of skyscrapers to swing off. This does feel like a big missed opportunity. As a form of virtual tourism, it's nice to take photos of stuff in Brooklyn or Queens and learn a little bit about them, but that's a pretty low bar to be aiming for. New sections of the map shouldn't just be an aesthetic expansion, they should ideally broaden gameplay opportunities, delivering stuff we haven't seen before or can't do elsewhere. Brooklyn and Queens both fail to do that, and barring one later mission that sees you sneaking through the back streets of Queen at night to avoid Kraven's forces, you'll barely notice the impact that these new spaces have on the overall experience. When it comes to what there is to do around New York City, there's a hell of a lot, more so than ever before, but in terms of how new a lot of this feels, I think your mileage may vary. There are plenty of returning activities. You'll still have the photo shoots and the random crimes where you have to stop a burglary or catch criminals as they speed away in a getaway car. That stuff is sort of lifted and dropped from the first game into this one. Then there are the sort of remixes on a theme, like instead of beating up bad guys at a Fisk construction site, you're beating up Kraven's goons as they light bonfires on top of buildings. Instead of collecting backpacks hidden throughout the city, you're collecting spider bots which are hidden throughout the city. This stuff has a new coat of paint, but it's basically the same stuff. Then there's the genuinely new stuff. One really fun side activity involves staying in the slipstream of one of these drone things, and the way it weaves through New York and the speed at which you travel it's always a good time. There's another one where Miles needs to open up these stashes left behind by his uncle, and they involve some scanning of the environment and puzzle solving to get them open, etc. It's pretty basic, but it gets the job done. So there's definitely some new stuff here. In fact, I'd say more than half of what you're doing in New York is new or new-ish, but all of it feels like it fits within an open world framework that hasn't evolved from the last game. It's still an assortment of very discrete, singular, disconnected activities peppered throughout the game. You do them to get some upgrade currencies, you do a lot of them to get the Platinum Trophy. For many, that's fine, and it must be said that completing the Platinum Trophy here is, as with the last game, a really pleasant experience. I haven't done it myself, but I've spoken to other reviewers who have, and you can Platinum Spider-Man 2 in around about 30 hours or so without needing to do any bullshit like many Platinum trophies ask you to do. This open world model was never groundbreaking, but it was fun and straightforward and never onerous and, yeah, pleasant. It was just a good excuse to go out there and do more Spidey stuff. It's that again here in Spider-Man 2, and if that's what you wanted, then great. But if you were hoping that that formula might evolve somewhat, then I think you're going to be a little bit disappointed. To be clear, I liked it, I really did, but I definitely found myself engaging with it less this time around because I felt as though I'd already experienced a lot of what was on offer. The biggest thing that transforms the feeling of being out in and above New York City is the wingsuit, and I'm sure I'm going to get in a lot of trouble for this take, but I think the way it's been implemented here isn't great, and I think Spider-Man 2 loses some of its identity owing to how powerful and convenient these wings are. So to be clear, you get them basically right away, like the first mission, and it lets you glide basically endlessly, and you can use them whenever and wherever you like. No restrictions, no limitations. It's really fun, especially at first. You're dive bombing to pick up speed, weaving in between buildings, pulling up to get your height back, and surveying the city below you. It's totally awesome. It has a nice feel to it as well. Like you can feel the wind resistance and you feel the laws of aerodynamics kicking in as you try to make turns that are too ambitious. It's genuinely super good. In fact, it's too good because it is so fast and so convenient and often so necessary that it quickly becomes your default means of getting around New York. And it's like, I don't know about that, man. Like, I'm playing a Spider-Man game, not a Superman game. Web swing is kind of the point, and I found myself doing a lot less of it this time around. So the obvious response is, well, what's the problem? If you don't like it, don't use it. And that's actually true, and that's actually what I started forcing myself to do after a while, stop using it, because I felt like I was missing out on the Spider-Man experience by defaulting to the wingsuit as often as I was able to. And so the obvious follow-up to that response is, well, if you don't have to use it and you can still web swing, then what the fuck are you complaining about? And the answer is, I don't know. It just doesn't feel quite right, to be honest with you. I felt more like a cape in this game than I did Spider-Man. And I think a lot of the open world traversal, any particular mission sequences, were less interesting for how much I could rely on it. There are wind tunnels scattered throughout New York, and had the wingsuit been limited to only those tunnels, then I think that would have been perfect. If the wings were a way to get across town fast, or across a body of water, then yeah, sure. But always available, always the fastest and most convenient means of transportation for Spider-Man, I do think that something was lost there. And if there does end up being a Spider-Man 3, I wouldn't mind seeing Spidey's wings being clipped just a little. When it comes to the main missions in Spider-Man 2, you're going to be doing three things: fighting, stealthing, and science. Let's do the science first. The science stuff in the first game, not great. Some really boring, drawn-out missions that felt like the game screeched to a halt every time we were forced to do them. We didn't mind doing them though, because I think we were all on board with what Insomniac were going for here. They were trying to show that Peter Parker isn't just a superhero, he's also a scientist, and they wanted to communicate that part of his personality and his story through actual gameplay. Insomniac retained that intention here in Spider-Man 2, and I think they do a much better job with the sorts of activities that you're doing in order to showcase the different sides of both Peter and Miles. There is still puzzle-solving science stuff. Some of it is in the main missions, but a lot of it's been pushed to the side missions. It's faster to get through and less compulsory than it was the first time around, so Insomniac have found a better balance here. There's also some genuinely exciting science stuff, like when Peter needs to go into a particle accelerator to repair it while it's turned on, or this weird minigame where you have to shoot bees using a shooting bee drone, and apparently this trains the drone to spot the bad bees or something. Really, it's just an excuse to shoot shit for a few seconds. It definitely works. It's fun.
We're training to detect and attack bee wolves.
AKA bee killer wasps.
And you're helping with the machine learning algorithm.
For Miles, Insomniac did a great job of showcasing his life as a high school student, namely by asking him to help out on campus with various odds and ends. One mission sees a rival school kidnap the school mascot, and so Miles has to go and solve a bunch of puzzles to find and rescue it before slinging it over his shoulder and web schlepping back to campus. Sure, he's in the suit rather than being straight up Miles, but he's on campus helping out fellow students with their problems, and it's nice.
Any luck? On my way back. And I'm bringing a fluffy friend.
The MJ stealthing stuff is back, and it's a lot better, though it definitely requires a lot more suspension of disbelief. MJ was pretty helpless in the first game, so the stealth sections were very limited in what she could do, other than just, don't get seen. Now MJ has a stun gun, and she will just run around KOing anybody in her path. As a result, she finds herself in some very, very dangerous situations and locations, far more so than like an after-hours art gallery, for example. But yeah, it is a little funny to see just how lethal MJ is against all manner of foe.
Where are you, Doc?
It must be said that MJ isn't the only one getting her stealth on. Miles and Peter are both able to do takedowns from above in certain mission settings, and these are often some of the most satisfying rooms to clear, since the stealth framework is surprisingly functional, aided by the inclusion of a new zipline feature that allows you to build a literal spiderweb above your foes' heads. But yeah, eventually, it's time to go to Pound Town, and when that happens, Spider-Man 2 delivers a surprising amount of improvement, more than enough to spice things up, in fact. There's been a reworking of the approach to abilities and gadgets. Miles and Peter each have moves unique to them which are mapped to the left trigger, and they also share a number of Spidey gadgets that are mapped to the right trigger. Hold one of those down and press a corresponding face button to execute your move of choice, and there are a number of different options you can equip from the menu. They're all on very short cooldown timers that only become shorter as the game goes on and the better you play, and they all offer a measure of strategic depth owing to their utility, One web gadget will knock a group of enemies into the air, rendering them temporarily helpless. Another will cluster a group of them together, making them prime pickings for Miles' AoE slam. You can just sort of mindlessly dump all of these abilities on cooldown and that'll work, but if you really take the time to understand what these things do and use them in the proper combination, you're going to be a lot more effective, which is important because I definitely found Spider-Man 2 to be a lot more challenging than the first two games, owing to things like enemy density and aggressiveness. Helping you out on that front is the inclusion of a parry mechanic. It's a parry mechanic. It means you aren't just riding the dodge button the entire time. It's optional in most cases, but some of the larger enemies will force you to use it or suffer the consequences. More than anything else, it helps you maintain aggressive momentum during combat, something you'll appreciate more and more as new moves get unlocked and as your own mastery grows. A special treat are the tag team takedowns. Often Peter and Miles will be fighting together or with someone else, and when that happens, hitting the takedown button will trigger a really impressive alley-oop style finisher. It just looks fucking cool.
Desperate to get their hands on Scorpion, me, or both.
One of the biggest changes is the way the game handles boss fights. Previously, they were kind of about doing certain things to trigger attack windows, and you do that X number of times to finish off the boss. Here in Spider-Man 2, bosses now have health bars. In fact, they have a lot of them. The big marquee bosses will have up to 4 health bars that need to be chipped away at over time, each one marking a new phase of the fight and offering a checkpoint when you complete it. Coupled with the increased difficulty of the game, I definitely found myself really appreciating these boss battles a lot more. I really had to knuckle down and earn it. I couldn't just master one mechanic and repeat it 3 times to win. I had to master my whole combat arsenal and bring it to bear over a sustained period, because these fights can go for a while. Definitely a notable step up versus the previous game. There aren't many of these boss encounters, but when they happen, they absolutely deliver. Where the narrative and open world side of Spider-Man 2 can often feel familiar, I really do think Insomniac found a new level here with mission and combat design. The better approach to science and stealth makes for better mission pacing, while the revised combat controls, the new moves, the parry, the tag team takedowns, and the boss battles all feel like meaningful improvements. It's not like you're playing a whole new game, don't get me wrong, but there's enough here to make combat feel notably better than in previous outings, and it's going to be more than enough to keep you feeling excited each time you need to put some hired goons in the dirt. So like I said at the top, I do think Spider-Man 2 is a better video game than the previous 2 Spider-Man games. It's unquestionably better looking, it runs better, it has more space to explore, 2 playable Spider-Men, better mission and boss design, better combat, better basketball. The first game had 0 basketball, so this is a no-brainer right here. But yeah, just because something is better in each of its components doesn't mean that the sum of those parts is greater. For me personally, I think this is a remarkably well-made game that is a must-purchase for anyone with a PS5 or eventually a PC, but it just didn't hit as hard for me the second time around. I do think the inclusion of Queens and Brooklyn was a bit of a missed opportunity, as I would have loved to have seen them do something that Manhattan wasn't already doing. I do think the wingsuit chipped away at that Spider-Man fantasy. I think the open world stuff continues to be diverse and enjoyable, but a lot of it felt quite familiar, and I wonder how this random assortment of activities could be combined to feel more satisfying and meaningful to complete, other than just for upgrade components and a platinum trophy. Finally, and I think most importantly, I definitely felt as though this story had its ups and downs in a way that I didn't feel about the previous game. That's totally subjective, everyone's going to have their own view on that stuff, but as someone who's grown up on Spidey and seen his stories told and retold countless times, I definitely feel ready for some new stories, or at the very least, a deeper inversion of those existing stories. Spider-Man 2 doesn't do that. It's pretty safe in most aspects, always enjoyable, always well told, but yeah, safe, at a time when I think Spidey could do with a little shaking up on the narrative front. Like every other review, all of that is just my subjective opinion, and surely many people will disagree. What is an indisputable fact is that this is a fantastic video game. Minor qualms one way or the other don't change how well made this is, how much is on offer, how dazzling its spectacle regularly is, how brilliant its combat continues to be, the list goes on. Spider-Man 2 may just be more Spider-Man, but when the bar that Insomniac hits is this impossibly high, more of that can never be a bad thing. So for a while now, I've been partnered with Eureka Ergonomic. They make top quality furniture packed with incredible functionality. Their standing desks, for example, I have one of them, so does Austin. We both love the look, the layout, the extra features like docking trays and cable management systems and all that. Truly the Cadillac of standing desks. Recently though, Eureka Ergonomic released something very new and very special, and it's A coffee table. Now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, dude, it's a coffee table. Why did you hype this up so much? Well, can your coffee table do this? If Eureka's standing desks are like the Cadillac of standing desks, then their coffee tables are like the James Bond of coffee tables, full of all sorts of surprising gadgets that nobody saw coming. Obviously, the fridge functionality is a big deal. It's two-drawered, high enough to handle a brewski and deep enough to handle a lot of them. In a lounge room setting, it's perfect for entertaining guests, but as gamers, it's just a place to stash our treats for when we're going, full goblin mode, and a trip to the fridge is just too far, man. Look, the minute they add fast travel to fridges, I'm all for it. But until then, I'll take the Eureka Ergonomic Smart Coffee Table, thank you very much. That's not all though. How about wireless charging? Sure, why not? Just drop your phone onto the table and boom, done, easy, it's charging, off you go. It also has USB ports on the side, allowing you to plug and charge even more devices, but we are not done. Check this out. That's right, my coffee table is playing Skyrim, or at least the soundtrack. Using the power of Bluetooth, you can connect to music playing devices, and the Eureka Ergonomic Smart Coffee Table will serve as a speaker with surprisingly great sound quality. It comes in 2 different sizes and 2 different colors. You can see I've got the brown finish here, but you can also get it in black and white. It's fantastic, it truly is. It's just a nice looking, well-made, feature-packed piece of furniture that feels like it's custom made for my setup, and I expect plenty of other people's setups as well. If you want to grab one, visit eurekaergonomic.com/skillup and use offer code SKILLUP to get 12% off your purchase. That code will work on any item across the Eureka site, and it's stackable with existing sales discounts. There are financing options available if you'd like to pay in installments instead of all up front, but conditions apply for that. The discount code is only valid until the end of December, so get in quick. That's eurekaergonomic.com/skillup and use offer code SKILLUP at checkout. Thanks Eureka Ergonomic for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.